All right. So Debbie, if you don't mind and you're able to introduce yourself. I am recording this, folks, so that we can share it with others that maybe couldn't be here tonight. But go ahead, Debbie, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I just noticed that it started lightning.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh, yeah.
It's so thank you.
So loud here.
Oh, well, thank you everybody for being flexible with the change of venue. I think it's really the best choice that we did not meet outdoors at the Fork and Barrel. So like Shannon said, I work as a holistic health coach, but I'm actually a registered nurse. And so that's what I do now on my own. And I'm also a ballroom dance instructor. So that's really all I'm going to say in way of introduction, because I think the most important thing is kind of what we're going to present and our questions. So I'd like to begin the evening with a joke. And I will apologize in advance if it offends anybody's sensibilities, but I don't think that it will. A husband and a wife go to the hospital because the husband has to have surgery. And after the operation, the surgeon comes out to talk to the wife and he says, "Ma'am, I'm afraid your husband is seriously ill. However, if you follow my advice to the letter and do everything I tell you to, he'll go on to live a long, healthy life. But you have to do 3 things. First thing you have to do is cook all his favorite meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Do you think you can do that?" And she said, "Yes, doctor, I think I can do that." He said, "Second thing is he's got to lead a completely stress-free life. So, you have to keep him calm and you have to shoulder a lot of the responsibilities. Do you think you can do that?" And she said, "Yeah, doctor, I think I can do that." He said, "Lastly, you have to give him all the sex he wants. Do you think you can do that?" And she says, "Yes, doctor, I think I can do that." He said, "Do you have any questions?" She goes, "No, but can I go back to see him?" So he takes her back to the recovery room and he leaves. And her husband's lying there on the gurney and he opens up his eyes. He said, "Honey, did you talk to the doctor?" And she said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Well, what did he say?" She says, "Bad news. You're going to die." So yeah, when I first heard that, I thought it was really funny, really cute. But as I started to think about it, I thought, what's interesting about that is the doctor was asking the wife to be in charge of her husband's health. It was up to her whether or not he lived to a ripe old age and how well he did. And we saw what kind of choice she made. So we know that our health is in our own hands, that we are the only people responsible for that. And there are people there who can help you and support you along the way. And I tell that to all my health coaching clients. A lot of times they'll say, "Oh, I wish I could put you in my pocket and take you to the grocery store with me or take you here or there." And I said, "You know what? I'm not the one that's doing this. I'm giving you the tools. I'm giving you the support. I'm right there with you to pick you up when you fall. But it comes down to whether or not you're going to do it." And that's really the moral of that story. So we are each responsible for our own health and well-being, whether that is our lifespan, meaning our longevity or the number of years that we live, but more importantly, our health span, the quality of those years, because I think that's where we have the biggest impact. Yes, what we do does influence our longevity, but we have more influence over how we feel every day and the quality of our life. Longevity medicine is a booming arena in the past decade or so. And the goal isn't to live forever, because we know there's no such thing as a fountain of youth. But the goal, I think, is to live as well as we can for as long as we can. So there's really a lot more to be discovered about aging. And I think it's rapidly improving, and we're rapidly increasing our knowledge in that arena. But one thing we do know is that aging is not the same for everybody. And it's not even the same in our own bodies. Our bodies don't age every organ doesn't age at the same rate and in the same way. So our bones can age at a different rate than our brain, which can age at a different rate and way than our heart. So there's a lot of variability in that. Our chronological age, or the number of candles on our birthday cake, can be quite different than our biological age, which is the age at which our body is actually functioning. So those two numbers can be completely different. And our chronological age, you know, how old we actually are, is not necessarily predictive of our real age or how fit we are or how healthy we are. So those can be vastly different numbers. And yeah, heredity does play a role in that. But what we're finding in the last couple of decades is that heredity plays less of a role than lifestyle. And that lifestyle is actually about 80% of the equation. It's responsible for about 80% of how we age. So I think that's, you know, really empowering. It's like that saying that says, heredity loads the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger. And you can see that with identical twin studies. There are many, many studies using identical twins. And then there's this huge database that has been going on for decades where they have followed identical twins. And in particular, those twins that get split up at birth, and one goes to live one place and one lives in some other place, completely separate, different area of the country. And they experience different things. And not only is their rate of aging different, but the diseases that they come down with are different. So it's not just heredity, because if it were, then it wouldn't matter where these twins were located. And recently, researchers have noted that 5 areas of your life, making healthy choices in 5 areas of your life, can extend your longevity by at least 10 years. And those areas are nutrition, activity, sleep, maintaining a normal body weight, and social connection. So what I'd like to do today is give you some tips about how you can extend your health span as well as your lifespan. So these will be some golden rules that will help you to live to a golden age. And if anybody has questions as you go, just let me know, because I'm really informal and we have a very small group. Okay, so tip number 1 is make Vegas a priority. Vegas, not Las Vegas, sorry to tell you. I'm talking about your vagus nerve. Have you heard about your vagus nerve? A couple of months back, I wrote a health column about the vagus nerve because it's so important when it comes to stress management, and it's so doable. Some of the things that we can do to strengthen that vagus nerve and initiate that relaxation response are so easy that I think if people knew about them, you know, we could engage with them a little bit more. Your vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your body. It runs from your head down through your throat, your chest, your abdomen, your pelvis. And it actually helps to counteract that fight, flight, or freeze, as I call syndrome. You know how they tell you when you get scared, it's either fight or flight? Well, I like to add freeze, because some people, you know, they don't fight, they don't flee, they freeze. And it's just because of that same adrenaline rush, but it incapacitates them. So that rush that you get, that fear-based rush, has to be counteracted in our body so that we can come back down out of it. And that's that relaxation response. And that's what the vagus nerve is primarily responsible for. So when you're scared or stressed out and your heart rate goes up and your breathing goes up and your muscles tighten, and a lot of people find, you know, their guts are tightened up into a knot, you know, they have digestive problems. That's that stress response. So we need something that kind of counteracts that and gets us back down to normal. Now, the problem here is our ancestors way back prehistorically, their stress was more physical stress, like they're being chased by the saber-toothed tiger. Well, fortunately, we don't have to worry about that. But the same response that they had to being chased by the saber-toothed tiger is the one we have when our boss stands in the door and says, your job's been eliminated, or you have a major fight with your spouse, or you're having financial problems, or something happens to your child. Same stress response. Your body doesn't know the difference. All it knows is that it kicks into that mode. So that's the same thing, but in a different way. And for us, I think stress is truly making us sick. We are not handling it well. Plus, there's just a lot of it, a lot of expectations. And I think at this point, it's making us sick. And it's been an interesting, you know, couple of years here with the pandemic. And initially, when the pandemic started, My response was, okay, I better step it up to make sure I'm protecting myself, to bolster my immune system. This is the time when I want to eat the best. I want to take my supplements. I want to, do my exercise and relaxation stuff. And naive as it was, I thought, well, this is the way a lot of people are probably handling it. But then I saw my clients coming through. I started having the emergency calls from my clients, and they were handling it completely differently. Most of them were eating their way through the pandemic, and that's where you got those pandemic pounds. Many of them couldn't sleep. They were suffering from anxiety and depression. It really threw them for a loop. So talk about the stress response kicking in, and this has been fairly prolonged. And yes, we are adjusting to some of the changes we have to make until this blows over. And, we're coping with that and we're getting used to it, but there's still a degree of uncertainty that always triggers stress for people. And it's still, life isn't back to normal. We're not in our comfort zone. So that triggers that stress response. The good news is that if you have a strong vagal tone, good vagus nerve functioning, it helps to calm you down quicker. It helps you to develop more emotional and stress resiliency. It boosts your immune system. It decreases inflammation. And interestingly enough, it is responsible for engaging our sense of connectivity to people and nurturance. So there's that emotional component too. And we can take steps to work on that. We can take steps to strengthen that vagal tone so that it kicks in a little quicker and things don't get so out of control when we feel like we're kind of keyed up and wound up. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we can practice diaphragmatic breathing. And I did provide you with a handout. I hope everybody has it. On what diaphragmatic breathing is and how to use it, how to develop it. Believe it or not, we've forgotten how to do it because I was about to say it's an acquired skill, but it isn't, because we're born breathing that way. If you watch babies when they're sleeping and you watch them breathe, you see their little Buddha bellies get bigger and smaller and bigger. You don't see a lot of chest movement. As adults, we have become shallow chest breathers. So babies, and we were born being deep diaphragmatic breathers, belly breathers. We've developed into shallow chest breathers, which is not only limiting for circulation and oxygenation, but it works against relaxing us. So it just feeds into that stress response. So when you breathe, does anybody here take yoga classes or meditation classes? Okay, because they usually focus in on belly breathing, they call it, or diaphragmatic breathing in those classes because of the relaxation component. But your diaphragm is a muscle that separates your chest cavity from your abdominal cavity. And it's really important in breathing. You might think it's just your lungs, but you need that muscle to help move that air in and out. So when you inhale, your diaphragm drops down so that you have more room. Your lungs can fill with air. So you can get more air because your diaphragm drops down and allows more space. When you exhale, your diaphragm pushes up and it helps to exhale, helps you to release that air, that pressure. So that's why they call it diaphragmatic breathing. We need to be able to trigger that deep breathing and get our diaphragm working so that we can take nice deep breaths. So that handout that I've given you walks you through how to practice that breathing, whether you're sitting down or you're lying down. Sometimes I think it's easier to do when you're lying down, but it gives you some different scenarios. It gives you a little exercise for deep progressive muscle relaxation and focusing on your breathing. So that's the first thing that you can do to help with that vagal tone and to initiate that relaxation response.
I don't have the handouts. How can I get them? Can you email them to me?
Yes, I can make sure everyone on the call gets it, and
Okay, good. Thanks.
no problem.
Thank you, Shannon. My favorite way of engaging that is by humming and singing. Humming and singing will strengthen your vagus nerve because remember I said it runs here, down through here, So the very act of using your vocal cords and your throat triggers the vagus nerve, not yawning. So we'll just say you were trying to take a deep breath there. So when you pull up to a stop sign, you'll frequently see me like belting out a song. I might be doing some chair dancing in the car. I now can just say, I'm working on the relaxation response, because it does feel so great, doesn't it? Like when your song comes on and you're singing, it feels like really cathartic to me. And that's why. The other thing that will trigger that is gargling. Again, the same reason, triggering this in the throat area. And it doesn't have to be with mouthwash. It doesn't matter what the liquid is. It's the simple act of gargling. So if you gargle when you get up in the morning, even with water, and before you go to bed at night, it helps with that relaxation. Oh, and one other thing, the humming and the singing. Do you know what the most relaxing sound is that you can emit? Om, om. And that's typically the sound that like the Buddhist monks make when they meditate, or the yogis use. So there is a long history of knowing that how that vibration affects the relaxation response. So we have humming and singing, we have gargling and laughing. You know, think about when you're with a group of people and you just have like what they call a big belly laugh, or you're watching a movie and it's hysterical, and you, by the time you're done, you said, oh my gosh, I laughed so hard, my ribs ache, my abs hurt. That triggers that relaxation response. And that's why we feel so good. We feel so relaxed. We're in a better mood thanks to the vagus nerve. Other activities that trigger it would be exercise, meditation, prayer, massage, and actually being out in nature. And that's why so many people find taking a walk in nature or being in a natural setting is so relaxing to them and so healing. Part of it is due to that response to the vagus nerve. So there's actually a lot of science behind this. So I think some of those things are really easy ways of triggering a relaxation response when you need to, without necessarily having to spend a lot of time or big chunks of time doing it.
Hey, Debbie, what about, this is something my dad always said, so I'm just curious. What about whistling? He's always like, whistling is so good for you. You should be whistling.
What? I don't see how that would be any different than humming or singing.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm. Because that nerve runs right down through there. Yeah, that's cute. So we're going to make Vegas a priority, number one, to help increase our lifespan and our health span. The second thing that we can do is that we can aim for A's. I don't mean being an overachiever or being a perfectionist. When I'm talking about A's, I'm talking about antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. And those of you that have been in some of my talks have heard me use these words before. Eating foods that are rich in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory substances is the single most important thing you can do to reduce your risk of chronic illness and to support your immune system. Now, we throw the term antioxidant out there a lot. What does that mean? An antioxidant would be substances in your food and some supplements also that counteract or negate the deleterious effects of some of the other stuff we come into contact with every day. So some of the pollutants in the air, the additives in our food, some of the chemicals that we put on our skin by way of body lotion, shampoo, and cosmetics. I mean, women are big with that. A lot of those products are, have a lot of little chemicals and toxins in them. So your antioxidants from your food, and as I said, some supplements counteract that. It's like they're little soldiers, little foot soldiers, and they see those things and they try to go gobble it up before it gets into your cells and wreaks havoc by causing disease. The good news is many of those foods that contain the antioxidants also contain the anti-inflammatories. And we know that inflammation is the foundation of all disease. Now, this doesn't mean that inflammation is bad, because we need inflammation. Like when we get sick, say a cold virus or something, that inflammatory response is what attacks it and tries to wall it off. Or if we cut our finger, it gets red and swollen. That's the inflammatory response trying to heal it. So we need short-term inflammation for healing. But the problem is when it doesn't remain short-term and it kind of runs amok and it becomes chronic inflammation. Now that's setting up an environment of dis-ease and disease in our bodies. So that's where those anti-inflammatories come in. Foods that are rich in antioxidants, fruits and vegetables and legumes, hands down, number one. Coffee and tea, especially green tea and white tea, but we just have to be careful what we put in the coffee and tea, not the mocha chocolate latte, blah, 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 with lots of sugar and fat in it. That's going to counteract that. But coffee, that's why you hear about coffee reducing risk of illness. It's not just tea. They come from plants and there are antioxidants in there. And then some whole grains. So whole grains are really important because they have fiber and they have all the nutrition of the plant rather than kind of milling it down and just giving you some refined grains. Does every single starch you eat have to be a whole grain? No, but at least 50% of your starches should come from that. So high fiber cereals, whole grain bread, brown rice or long grain rice. Usually I have people who they're trying to eat better. So they'll try to eat like whole grain pastas, and people either love them, like they may be made of legumes or, other grains. They either love them or they hate them. So if I have somebody who really doesn't like it, I'll say to them, don't worry about it. Eat all your other choices as whole grains, and then just eat your regular pasta, because it doesn't have to be 100% of your grains whole. When it comes to anti-inflammatories, they are contained in all those foods we just talked about, but in addition, sources of omega-3 fatty acids. So you're looking at seafood, especially cold water fish that's a little higher in fat content, like salmon, mackerel, tuna, trout, sardines, nuts, seeds, nut butters, avocado, extra virgin olive oil, flaxseed, soy products, organic soy products. So your anti-inflammatories come from your fruits and vegetables and legumes, your tea and your coffee, some of your whole grains, and then some of your sources of healthy fats. Additionally, spices. And I think that's way underestimated and overlooked because we tend to look at recipes and go, oh, I don't want to have to put all those spices in there, or I don't want to buy all those spices. And we kind of cut them out. We use salt a lot. But spices, like, they're Mother Nature's, big gift to us. So I always say, if Mother Nature's gift, the present, would be the fruits and vegetables, the red bow on the present would be the spices. And it doesn't matter if it's a whole fresh spice or if it's a dried spice. We need to start using them and using a variety of them in our foods. And a lot of cultures, and I'm thinking in particular, the Indian culture and some of the Asian cultures, they highly spice their foods. And that's what's attributable to some of their lower disease rates. There are also studies that show that people who eat at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day have half the cancer rates of people who don't. That's significant. Reducing your risk of cancer by 50% just based on the number of fruits and vegetables that you eat. So I think that we just don't realize the impact of our choices. So how can we put this into practice? First of all, like I said, enjoy your morning cup of tea or coffee. If you want to make iced tea, use green tea. If tea tends to bother your stomach or is a little strong for you, white tea is very, very mild and actually has the highest amount of antioxidants in it because it's the least fermented. So we can use hot or cold plain tea. I would say at breakfast, get 1 or 2 servings of fruit at breakfast, not juice, not canned fruit, but either whole fresh or frozen fruit. And then at lunch and dinner, eat 1 to 1.5 cups of vegetables. If you do that, you're going to hit your 5 really easily. You're going to be 5 to 7. And it's really not that hard. If you think of adding it like that to each meal, then it becomes a little bit more doable. And then last but not least, add a spice to each meal. So at breakfast, maybe some of your sweeter spices like cardamom, cinnamon, nutmeg, to your yogurt, your smoothie, your oatmeal, your peanut butter toast, your fruit. Oftentimes I like to sprinkle some cinnamon on my fruit or nutmeg, and then add something to any of your meats, your pasta dishes, rice, vegetables. I mean, it's really, really easy. Just something as easy as, say, we're coming out of tomato season, but we had tomatoes coming out the wazoo over the summer. You slice tomatoes and put little leaves of basil on them, kind of like a caprese, where you can put a little balsamic vinegar and olive oil and a little fresh mozzarella. That's one of the healthiest meals you can have. It takes you 5 whole minutes to make. I actually like to eat that for breakfast. It's one of my favorite breakfasts. So just start to think a little bit outside of the box. I think we get into a little bit of a rut and we just forget that there are some different ways of doing things that'll benefit us more. So we're going to make Vegas a priority. We're going to strive for A's in our antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. The third thing that I'd recommend to you is that we start pumping some iron. Ladies, we got to pump some iron. So maintaining your muscle tone and your muscle mass as you age is one of the best things that you can do to optimize your longevity. Why? Because when we start to lose muscle tone and muscle mass, it significantly increases our risk of death. And get this, in people over the age of 50, like I'm not saying 70 or 80. I'm not talking about some little grandmas with osteoporosis or something. I'm talking about 50-year-olds. The rate of premature death increases as your muscle tone decreases, even if you're doing cardio. So it can't just be about cardio. And with my female clients, they tend to be more of the aerobic kind of cardio crowd. And my male clients tend to be the strength training, weightlifting crowd. And honestly, we both need both. Men need some cardio too, and we need some strength training. Unless you begin doing strength training, you will start to lose muscle tone after the age of 30 at a rate of 3 to 8% loss per decade. And once you get to age 60, that rate increases. So by the time you're 80, you feasibly could have lost about 40% of your muscle mass and your muscle tone. That significantly affects our fall risk. And that's why it's a risk factor for premature death. Because falling doesn't have to just do with breaking a bone. It's why are you falling in the first place? Why isn't your balance good? A lot of balance comes from muscle strength. And we tend to think of stretching and we tend to think of things that we can do to prevent falls, but we don't think about how muscle strength prevents them to begin with. So for everyone, full body workout, strength training workout, 3 non-consecutive days a week. So like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you have a day in between where you're giving your muscles a little break. Now you can do walking in between, but the strength training part, the weightlifting, every other day. You can use resistance bands. You can use light dumbbells. You can use machines at a gym. Doesn't matter as long as you're strengthening those muscles. And the added benefit for us is that muscle burns more calories than fat. So once you start to tone your muscles, your metabolism automatically increases, makes it much easier to maintain your weight or lose it. And that's one reason why men lose weight a lot faster than women, is because their percentage of muscle is very high and their percentage of body fat is low in a normal state. For us, it's the opposite because of childbearing and lactation. So our percentage of body fat is higher. Once we can manipulate that a little bit and tone up our muscles, and I'm not talking about being, like a bodybuilder. I'm talking about just doing some of these exercises on a regular basis and building up to about 30 to 45 minutes a day, or not a day, at a session. And I would say, personally, I like to go at least 45 minutes for strength training. If you need some ideas about exercises and you're on Pinterest, you can go to my Pinterest page, and I have a few public boards. And the one that says Fitness for Clients has all kinds of strength training exercises on there, and a lot of like floor work that you can do, like calisthenics and stretches. So that's something that is really, really important. And the other thing is, you don't want to get stuck in an exercise rut either. Our bodies are smart. They try to work the most efficiently. So they don't like that rut. If you get stuck doing the same exercises for 6 months at a clip, you're not going to get the gain out of it that you once did, because your body kind of gets into that rhythm and doesn't have to work as hard because it's doing the same thing and it knows. So every 3 to 4 months, change your exercise routine a little bit, whether it's your strength training exercises or something cardio. That's why it's kind of nice to change it seasonally, so you're not doing the same thing all year round. You have a greater benefit from it. And simply increasing your muscle tone will actually decrease your risk of premature death and increase your longevity, as well as your functionality. Like, it's so much easier to have greater range of motion, to be able to, reach the top shelf. Well, at my size, nobody ever reaches the top shelf, but you can get your arm over the top, or I can scoot down, pick up groceries or pick up your grandchild without wrenching your shoulder or pulling your back. It's just more fluidity and more ease of movement. So the third thing you can do to improve your longevity is to pump some iron. Number 4 is to mind your brain. Mind your brain. Because it's not just about our physical bodies and physical fitness. We want to have good mental fitness as well. We want to have healthy bodies and well-functioning minds. We don't want to look great and be strong, but man, we've gone crackers upstairs. We just lost it. It's like a little sponge in there. Believe it or not, and I know this is a tough pill to swallow, it's really hard to believe, but mental deterioration is not a natural consequence of aging. Like, you shouldn't just expect that you're going to lose your mind, that your memory is going to be like the worst thing, that you're going to get dementia. That is not inevitable. Yeah, there's a little bit of a genetic component there, just like everything else, but a lot of it has to do with the cumulative effects of your lifestyle. And that's backed by volumes and volumes of research. Now, I'm not saying that your mind might not work differently than it did when you were 21, but it doesn't mean that it's just gone to mush and that you're not going to be able to think. And I also believe, especially the older I get, that, you're amassing more and more knowledge up here. So it's going to take you a little bit longer to get through that and process it and try to retrieve that information. It's like when you start off at your job and you have one filing cabinet filled with files, and by the time you retire, you've got 10 filing cabinets filled with files. It's going to take you longer to go through and find things because you got 10 than it was when you had one. So that's a big part of it. Research has shown that our brain hardware is fully capable of growth and more complex thinking as we age. The key is to remain engaged in the world by learning new things and interacting with people. So as we age, sometimes we work against ourselves. And I see it sometimes in new retirees. They're so happy to be retired. They don't want to have to go to work. And then you'll see some of them that they're lost and they sit around and they do nothing. Maybe they watch TV all the time. Now they're starting to vegetate. They're not only are they not getting any physical activity sometimes, but they're not using their minds. Okay, we have to use this or we lose it. It's just like a muscle. We use it and become stronger, or we lose it and it becomes flabby. So oftentimes what happens with aging is we're not using it. We're not engaging it. We're not stressing it. We're not making it learn new things like we did when we were younger. And that's actually why we have some of the problems that we do. In 2003, I think it was, researchers looked at a bunch of recreational activities to see which ones strengthened our minds and actually lowered the risk of dementia. What? Jen says golf, but guess what? No, it did. Yeah, golf did not make the list, Jen, sorry. So the number one thing was dancing. Yeah, dancing. And being a ballroom dancer and a ballroom dance instructor, I really believe it's because you engage both halves of your brain. You know, you've got the analytical half that's trying to figure out your steps and putting the steps together and, you know, putting together a lead or a follow. And then you have the artistic half that's thinking about timing and musicality and styling. Not to mention the fact that you're physically active. So it's a physical activity. So I think that's why dancing comes in so strong. So that was the first one. Second one, board games. But actual board games like we played when we were kids, not this me, you know, on the electronics. That wasn't quite so mentally stimulating. So it was actual board games. Thirdly, playing a musical instrument. Fourth, crossword puzzles. And fifth, reading. So those were the top 5 brain building activities. And frequency with which people did that made a difference too. So when they looked at people who did crossword puzzles 4 times a week versus people who did crossword puzzles once a week, they found that those who engaged in it 4 times a week lowered their risk of dementia by 47%. So it was a bigger impact. So think about things that you can do that constantly challenge you, that challenge your mind, that challenge learning, because that's what strengthens our brain. The other thing I'd like to mention about brain functioning is that it's highly dependent upon your nutrition. In fact, when you eat, the first place a lot of your nutrition goes is directly to your brain, because your brain utilizes most of it. It burns up a lot of calories and utilizes a lot of glucose and needs a lot of the nutrition from your food. So paying particular attention to the quality of your food and balancing is really important. 2 top things you can eat for brain functioning: dark green leafy vegetables and berries, at least 3 times a week. Your brain loves them. Okay, and last but not least, for improving our longevity and the quality of our lives is to keep good company. And this is where our relationships come in and the importance of those relationships. So what I'm getting at here is trying to maintain some nurturing, supportive relationships to feel like you're not just in it alone and you have somebody that you can go to. And I think this became perfectly clear, the importance of this during this pandemic, when people couldn't get together. People really, really struggled. And a lot of seniors or people who had, you know, limited interaction in any other way struggled. People in nursing homes, people in hospitals or group homes where there were no visitors that were allowed. It was very, very distressing to people and very sad to watch. We are social creatures. And even myself, I like to say, you would think that I'm not a private person because I have a high profile job. I do stuff on TV and I'm always sharing stuff, but personally, I am pretty private. And so like, I'm the kind of person that if I go someplace with my husband or go to a party, like, okay, I can socialize for about an hour and a half. Then I'm ready to go home. My husband, 4 hours later, still talking. I'm like, oh, why didn't I drive separately? So I didn't really think it was going to be that much of an issue, but I even noticed it. And I don't feel like I'm that outwardly social or need that much social stimulation. So I think, you know, one thing I learned was the value of interconnectedness and how much we all need each other. So we need to be around at least some people who are positive and supportive, but that might also mean kind of limiting our time around those energy leeches. You know, those people in our lives who just suck the very life force right out of us. And if you see them walking down the street or you see them coming down the hall, you're like, oh, You know, your energy levels sink, your demeanor changes, you feel like ducking somewhere because they're just like a little energy vampire. And it's hard to maintain your positive attitude and your energy around them. So sometimes we have to balance that out so that we're not around that too much. And it's not just other people's attitude that affects our health and our longevity, it's also our own. And in fact, the New England Centenarian study found that one trait common to centenarians or people over 100 was having a positive outlook on life and being optimistic and a good sense of humor. So that will take you a long way. I remember, I think it was about your early 2000s when Jay Leno was on television, and he said that there was this landmark study that showed that pessimists had a 19% greater chance of dying early as compared to optimists, and nobody can believe it. I mean, it just sounds so incredible, but that study was there, and that's exactly what it showed. So our outlook and the way we interact with people definitely affects the quality of our life and the number of our years. The MacArthur Foundation study found that the risk of early death is 2 to 4 times higher in people with fewer and weaker social relationships. And that's after they took into account all their other health indicators, like any disease they had, their weight, their activity level, their blood pressure, all that. They controlled for all that, and still your relationships were that important. A Harvard study found that socially active seniors outlived their reclusive counterparts by a minimum of 2.5 years. So if you know people that may be struggling right now or don't have a lot of friends and family around, reach out to them. It makes a huge difference for them and for us. And good news if you're a pet lover, your relationship with your pet counts too. In fact, I think the relationship with the pet's one of the most important ones, but that's just me because I have a little dog that I treat like a little baby. So he's the little light of my life, and my husband knows. He comes behind the dog. There's the pecking order right there. But those relationships are important too. And that's why they bring a lot of pets into nursing homes and senior centers and those kinds of places, and hospitals. You know, pet therapy is really important. So how can we put this into practice? Well, you know how sometimes you have a gathering or you have like a holiday dinner, and you have the obligatory invites, people you got to invite for harmony in the family, but you don't really want to spend time around them, you know, that kind of thing. Well, we spend enough time doing that. Let's have a get together of just people you like, just some of your favorite people. Maybe not during the pandemic, but afterwards. Throw together, just doesn't even have to be huge, a little gathering of people that maybe you get together with regularly, and make time to do that. I think that's part of it, making time. The second thing, and it goes right along with that, is reaching out to people. Because sometimes you think, oh, you know what? I used to do that with these people and I just got away from it. We don't do it anymore. Or sometimes you think, oh, why am I always the person who's got to organize it or reach out to people? The bottom line is, if you want to spend time around these people, you be the one to reach out. You be the one to take the bull by the horns and get that person together, or get together with that person, because it's going to benefit you too. So be the one who reaches out. If not, what happens is time goes by and nobody reaches out, and your world becomes smaller and smaller, your social circle. And as I get older, I realize the value of having people in my life who are younger than me, because I watch people, and as they age, all their contemporaries are aging and dying off. And if you don't have, like a vast age span of friends, you might be kind of lonely as you grow older. So start to cultivate that now with different activities and people of different ages. And then last but not least, limit your time around some of those really negative people. And that might not mean that you can cut somebody out of your life, but it usually means that you can see them on your terms, or you can deal with them a little bit better on your terms. So maybe somebody, you know, relative calls who's very needy or who's very down, and it's not a good time for you. It's okay not to answer the phone at that time. Don't avoid them, but call them back or interact with them when you're in a better state of mind, when you're not tired, when you don't have a million things going on, when you're in a better mood. So sometimes it just means thinking about where you need to be and setting some boundaries and some limitations so that you can deal with those people that you really can't cut out of your life, but they're not really good for your well-being, you know, to have too much contact with. So those are 3 ways that you can make your relationships work for you, and you can have that sense of connectedness. Just like everything else, like our diet and exercise, we have to work at it. Just because it's a relationship doesn't mean it just comes by naturally and easily. We have to be able to cultivate those things in our lives. So those are 5 things that you can do that will not only increase your chances of longevity, but they will decrease your chances of disease, increase your chances of being happy, and just the quality of your life and the quality of your years and how you feel every day. Does anybody have any questions? Something I didn't bring up? Something I said might have triggered a question? We're all good? Okay, if you don't have the handout, Shannon will make it available to you. And I don't think I put on that handout. I usually put my contact information, and I don't think it's on there. But my email is Debbie, DEBBIE, at Health on Heels, HEALTHONHEELS, you know, like high heels. Debbie at healthonheels.com. And if you have a question or, you know, there's something that you need I can help you with, just let me know.
Debbie, I do have a question. As far as eating 5 vegetables and fruits a day,
Mhm.
and I know, you know, that I get kidney stones.
Mhm.
So, you know, I love spinach and kale are my favorites.
Mhm.
But I have to be careful with that. What
Yes.
vegetables, aside from the greens, would you recommend? Higher, you know, more
So
nutritious?
low, yes. So you want fruits and vegetables that are low in oxalic acid. And there are many of them. So what you can do, and I'll give you some of them, but what you can do is just go to like WebMD and type in like a kidney stone diet. And they have a really nice handout there of foods that are like low, that you could eat a lot of, foods that you maybe only eat once a week, and foods that you should avoid. So your greens, yes. However, if you cook them and you eat them in small amounts, it's less likely to trigger a problem. So for example, I know spinach is one of the lower ones. So that would be good for you to eat, but maybe limited to a half a cup of cooked spinach and not eating raw spinach in a salad. Some of your cruciferous vegetables, green beans, some legumes. But if you look at that handout, they'll give you amounts. And sometimes if you have a real problem with it, doctors will say to you, okay, I want you to only eat this many milligrams of oxalic acid in your diet. And then you can look at the handout and it tells you like how many milligrams is in everything. So it's a little harder, but it's definitely doable. I just had a client that I was working with the exact same problem. And I sent her that handout with WebMD and then went through. The fruits usually are a little bit better, not as bad as some of the vegetables. But again, there are many, many that you can eat that are still good for you.
I'll get on that website. Thanks.
Yeah, it's WebMD, and just type in like kidney stone diet or, you know, diet for people with kidney stones, and it'll come up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon,
Yes.
will we be able to see this video again, to watch it again?
Yes, that's why we did record it. So
Okay.
after, you know what, as soon as it has to, when we're done, it takes it a minute to whatever it does, whatever that term is. When that is complete, I can send out the link, and Debbie, I'll include your email address in case
Okay.
anyone didn't have a way to
Okay.
write that down, and then the handout. So I'd be happy to share that.
I know Debbie you've recorded some of Debbie's others. Are we able to see those again?
I will send you the link. It's our YouTube channel. That's
Okay.
where I house all of those videos. So I'll make sure to just put the link in there to our channel, so you'll be able to find all of them. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Jen just said she has all the links on a piece of paper, like a document that she could share.
Oh,
Okay.
perfect. Okay. She's so organized.
I know.
Oh my goodness. All right, I have one last question if no one else has a question. You talked about spices, and I think that's an area that I could probably do a little bit better myself. Like when you think about not a fresh spice, but let's think about cinnamon. Like, how much do you use to get a benefit from it?
Well, you're going to get a benefit from using any amount. The only thing that, when you specifically said cinnamon, some people like to use cinnamon to help with their blood sugar. So in order to use that, you're going to need like a good quarter to a half a teaspoon a day. So you'd have to break it up. But if you're not looking at it for a specific medical issue, you just want to gain the benefits, then I wouldn't worry about a specific amount, just use it.
Okay, good. Good to know. Okay.
Anybody else?
Anybody else? Any questions? This is your chance. You've got the expert.
Thanks, Debbie. I have to run.
All
But
right.
thank you very, very much. I took a lot of notes and I'll have the handout. So thank you very much.
You're
Excellent.
welcome.
Good to
Take
see
care.
you, Kathy. Thanks for
See you,
joining.
everybody.
All right. Well, if no other questions, we will let Debbie get on with her evening. But thank you so much for being here. We greatly appreciate it,
You're
your
welcome.
time, and always great tips that we can put to work, ladies. Those 5 things. I'm going to go
Enjoy
do
yourselves,
some
everybody.
dumbbells right now.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Safe travel.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.